Hi, people. Hello, humans. Hello. Jana, Heather, Stephanie, Robin, Amy, Cara, Tiare, David, Sophie, Midori, Katarina. Oh, there's so many of you now to say your name. Love you, gorgeous people. Good work at being human. Yeah. Good work at that. If you want to go to gallery view and see everyone, please do. Yeah, if you want to turn your camera on. If it's off, please do. If you want to take a really deep breath and kind of let your day flow through you and over you, please do. Yeah, I see some shaking of the shoulders. Yeah. If you want to take a second to kind of ground in to your own existence, you can cup your genitals, male or female. Maybe let a sigh out through your mouth. Please do. And if you just want to sit there and not do any of it, please do. Cool. So I'm going to read to you the description of this class. My name's Andy, Dr. Andrea Page, my former professional ego. You're welcome to call me Andy or Sue or Bob, whatever you want to call me. And I'm here with a strong bias towards doing the work, the real work. The term "the work" might have been appropriated by Byron Katie, but you know, the work where we're really sitting in it and going through it and not bypassing any of it or chasing anything outside of us. The work that kind of gets us somewhere, so much so that we find an ever expansive nature and a sense of resilience beyond our wildest imaginations. And the work that allows us to break through places that we didn't even know existed, not to become anyone or be seen in any certain way, but rather the work that allows us to sit more comfortably with ourselves. Yeah. So raise your hand if you know a little bit about what that work is like. It's not usually pretty. It's definitely not really easy. Yeah, I see lots of beautiful palms of hands. Yeah, like a giant high five. I see some digital hands from those off screen. Thank you. Yeah, welcome. Jim's like, what are we doing? Raising my hand. So good. You humans. Isn't it funny? What, Jim?
I just came in right in the middle of what you were saying.
Yeah, exactly. I saw that. We were inquiring into who's familiar with actually doing the work, you know, that deep work, that uncomfortable work. And so he's like, all right, my hand wasn't too far off. So let me, this is what we're going to do today. We're here for 90 minutes and we'll dive into a deep sense of perhaps facing ourselves. Those of you who have been to my lectures before, either at this or any of the other online festivals or in person, make a note of that in the chat so that I can see, please. And then I'll have some reference point. I do recognize some of your faces. Welcome back. I'm really glad you're here. And yeah, we'll see where we go today. But my, I want to share, let's say my intention, for want of a better word, for this session is for all of us to really kind of face deeply and hardly that which we look for outside of ourselves. And so that can be on any level, right? It can be on a level of mommy, daddy, people pleasing. It can be on a level of desire, sheer desire for what we want to happen in our life. It can definitely be on a more banal sexual level of, the lust and these things. And let's just get really familiar with that which we look for outside of ourselves, because if we can become more aware of it inside ourselves, then we'll begin to see it more clearly in other people, not in a way where we're judging them or, thinking on any level of morality, but we're just really clearly seeing what's driving someone. And when we can start to see through things without any need for it to be bad, but just seeing it for what it is, then all of a sudden our life becomes so much richer because we've developed this X-ray vision. This is what we do at the institute that I founded, called the Institute for Aliveness, or TIFA, you see. And we're really training to be the Jedi class of humanity, being able to see through things. And in this specific lecture today, we'll be talking about trauma or lack thereof, and how it's acknowledged or not in the Tantra scene. And this is a Tantra festival, right? Did I log on to the right Zoom? This is a Tantra festival. Yeah, I think. Yeah, okay, good, thanks. Sean Michael gives me a thumbs up. So hopefully this is something you're familiar about. You've been brave enough to show up here, so my guess is yes. And let's see. All right, so I'm going to read the description, and then I'd love to hear from some of you why you're here. And if you'd like, I'd love to do the class backwards. I want you to ask any questions that you have, or any questions that you might have, at the end. I want you to ask them at the beginning. Yeah, so feel into that. All right, I'll read this to you. This is the description of this class. Have you ever not known where to place your rejection or your desire? Have you pursued another for the sake of sacred sex without connection to yourself? Why are all these Tantra men so boyish and the women so affected? Do these people have answers for my sex life? A frank look at the modern Tantra scene, a survey of experience, an engagement with true awakening to see if what's going on behind the psyche of those in the modern scene. Pulling from Reichian theory and trauma pattern analysis, this interactive lecture will change how you think about yourself and how you approach Tantra. What a ballsy promise. Let's see how we go with it. All right. So humans, your turn. You're welcome to unmute yourself and share why you're here, what you're looking for, or what about what I just said feels really real for you. And we'll just start off. An anonymous person who sent me a private message said, I am here because I was recently raped and I wanted to see if you had anything to offer me in processing this. The perpetrator was an older man who trained with Source Tantra. Oh, how lovely. That's real. Thank you for sharing. We can take a breath in and out of that. And see and confirm that this is a significant issue in the modern Tantra scene. And in the name of light and in the name of sacred sexuality, it kind of just goes by, right? Unanswered. Yeah. Are there any other questions that want to come in before we speak to that one specifically? And they can be thoughts or ideas as well. Feel free to unmute. type.
I would like to offer, I don't know, just reflections along this line. One that comes up for me is power dynamics. So of, especially when I just first came in, leaders having a lot of pull and influence and feeling very safe at first, and then feeling kind of dropped. And yeah, all in the name of this, oh, well, it's free love, wild love. And yeah, just, oh, you know, they have so many beloveds everywhere. And so feeling like I had to figure out how to move on from that very intense, heightened experience on my own, and just accept, oh, this is the Tantra way, or you know, like that was sort of like what I was telling myself. And then as I evolved, I'm like, oh, that was not cool. That is not the tantric way. And so and then the other thing is when meeting with a soul that is also kind of just coming to the tantric path, and yeah, it's just can be very intense. And if we're not each resourced, you know, yeah, having more tools to kind of or more clarity on how slow you should go. and not realizing it until later, like, oh yeah, like I could have paced myself differently. But if both people are not are new, you know, there's just so much room for like trauma to happen, or just gaps, you know, gaps of yeah. A feeling of being floating in the ether. Like just like, where am I going? And luckily I've had amazing mentors that, you know, help me ground and find myself. But yeah, like I find that that's very common. And so I love that you're bringing this. I love that you're bringing this discussion here. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Karina, for sharing and for confirming an experience that my guess is more of you have probably had. Raise your hand if you're familiar with Karina's story, let's say. If you've been there, if you've seen that. Yeah, I see some palms. Yeah, and I see lots of people not raising their hands. So hey, it's good that we're having this discussion so you can have a little bit of a warning. Two other things that have come through privately to me in the chat was a sense of shame of the manipulation of not seeing perpetrators, ignoring red flags. There was also a request of how to spot the sex addicts or the love addicts hiding under the guise of free love. And this is the see-through X-ray analysis, that Jedi ability that I hope I can impart a little bit upon you. Yeah. So let's see where we go today and see where we swim. Yeah, please, Robin. Is that a finger? Come.
Yeah, I have a question. We as women, we are receiving in the genital area. So when you have sex with a male, I heard they give you their trauma and you carry it with you on cellular level for like 7 years. But how much trauma do you get in, and is there a way to also release it or give it back to the person?
Yeah, cool. Let's just answer this one off the bat. So trauma is not something that's quantifiable, unfortunately. might be easier to count it and identify it. This essence of energetics that you're speaking to, of someone kind of offering something and you receiving something, it's also unquantifiable. That is the nature of energy. And so to put a quantified time piece on it, like 7 years, is the mind playing tricks on itself. And your belief in it is what makes it real. That is the nature of energy itself, and quantum physics is showing us this. And so perhaps I would invite you to stay with a really simplistic and yet pervasive understanding of energy. That if someone's holding something pretty dark and you're allowing them physically to enter you, that sense is also entering you, right? And that darkness doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing, right? But that you're aware of the process of what's happening, and that you notice maybe afterwards how you feel or what you're carrying. Now, if you start to tell yourself a story about it, you've entrapped yourself into a fairy tale that is of your own creation. And yet, if you can really be a bit of a scientist in your own living laboratory, then you can self-reflect to the point where maybe next time you're not going to make that decision. If you notice that someone's holding a really heavy energy, which likely comes from childhood trauma, right? Especially unresolved childhood trauma, which most of us have. But it's about doing the work. Remember at the beginning, the work, asking ourselves those hard questions. And many people in the Tantra scene think that they've found a shortcut, right? Liberation, yeah. Without having done the work and getting lots of sex, especially if you're a man with a big old belly, because that's how you're cool, because you're a baba, right? Sorry, I digress. Yeah. And so the next time, right, that you find yourself in a position where you might be engaging with someone who you realize you're kind of trained, you're sensing that they're holding some kind of energy, right? You can say to yourself, wow, yeah, no, this is sacred, right? It's not the sex that's sacred, it's your womb that's sacred. And so you take a deep breath, yeah. And so like, hey, bro, we can kiss and cuddle and whatever, but you ain't entering here, right? Maybe go do your work. Go do the work. There's nowhere to get to with the work, but once you dive in, you realize you're swimming deep, and he'll show up differently. And then when he shows up differently, you'll feel yourself expand and open, right? It will be an effortless surrender. And I think that polarity is something really misunderstood in the Tantra scene, right? Women are trying so hard to surrender, when actually most of the time, as I said in the little description, the men are so boyish, right? That there's this sense of if a man's not able to actually contain, right, then the woman, oh, but I'm supposed to release and surrender. But my entire system is telling me, no, this isn't safe, because it's not. Yeah, I see some of these like kind of nods. Yeah, and so we see this juxtaposition, and we can really start to trust the polarity that's clear in our bodies. A lot of Tantra and the free love messaging is overriding a deeper knowing, an intuitive knowing inside of us. Yeah. And I respect what's behind that, of like, let me live on the edge, or let me try something uncomfortable, throw myself out of my comfort zone. And yet, at the end of the day, where do we get? Yeah. Yeah, Robin? Yeah, a lot there. Other questions or thoughts? Please let yourself be heard. So someone wrote in the chat, a dear male friend, sometimes lover, carries a lot of shame because of childhood trauma. And he said that their sexual relationship really helped him come to terms with a lot of his shame. Yeah. So, I mean, that can definitely be beautiful. If there's a boyish nature, right, and there's this sexual interaction, almost always you'll be projected on as mother. And so notice where you're playing into that as well. Something to watch out for. Marina, please talk to us.
Wow. So a lot of my trauma comes with receiving a lot of male energy when I was younger and unaware of like what that happens. And now I'm in the Tantra scene and I feel a lot of like fear of interacting with sexual energy because I don't want to take on energies I don't want. And so I like am terrified of cuddle puddles because I'm just like, that's so much energy. I don't even know y'all. How do I know if it's safe for me to enter this space? So I'm just curious if you can like talk on like cuddling and kissing and how do we know when it's safe to share energy and how do we know when it's not safe to share energy?
Yeah. Heck yeah. I mean, I can be there. You're singing my story. So yeah, I'm right there with you. I want to also quantify this idea of safe and not safe, as well as share energy. So I'm a scientist, right? So I come into hippy dippy scenes and I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about, people? Right? And this isn't you specifically, Marina, but just like in general, right? So when we talk about the heart and opening the heart, we're actually talking about the nerve plexus, the ganglia of nerves around the heart and the sensations that come there, right? We can also be talking about a level of armor, which will represent itself in fascia in the body, literally closing off the front of the body or the heart. Right? When we talk about sharing energy, we're talking about the interaction of auric fields. Yeah, you guys know about this. The up to 10 feet away from your body or 3 meters away from your body, where you can kind of enter into someone else's space energetically. Okay. When we talk about a sense of safety, this is completely subjective, and that sucks. Because some of the shit that you see out here in the Tantra scene, I want to say is objectively unsafe. But the thing is, and just like I always say to people, my safety is something I carry with me. Safety is subjective. So if we can take a breath into that and be like, oh, fuck, okay. That means I have a lot more responsibility than I thought I signed up for. But what this is, and Marina, what both of our stories, and I'm sure many other humans' stories here, is about is avoidant tendencies that are inbred deeply into the nervous system. Yeah. And so I think attachment theory has made its rounds through a lot of the New Age thought. So it's probably something you've been exposed to. Yeah. So let's just do a quick refresh in case some of you haven't been exposed, yeah? When we look at attachment theory, this is an early childhood development, like bedrock theory, where we see that depending upon how a child was in toddlerhood, right, the first 1 to 2 years of life, we start to see how their nervous system was woven or how it was integrated or not. Yeah? So there's 3 main styles of attachment. The first would be securely attached, right? This is perfect. You're perfect, right? It's about 2% of people, right? Depending on who's counting, but very few people are securely attached. All right, so let's talk about the rest of us, all right? The next type is the avoidant, which is what we had just mentioned with Marina. So this is, you see a cuddle puddle and it's like, oh fuck, I'm hitting the highway right now. Get me out of here. Anyone else? Avoidance in the room? Yeah, those who are scared to leave a relationship, right? Are scared to enter a relationship, don't have many relationships. Those who keep traveling, right? Those who are like, okay, give me a hug, but don't touch me. Those who can't sleep in a bed with someone else. Yeah, am I singing your story, some of you? We have some bashful avoidance here. Yeah, so the avoidant tendencies run deep and throughout your entire life. Yeah. And the thing is that this isn't a thought pattern. this is something that's woven into the nervous system. So back in toddlerhood, right, early childhood experiences, what happened was that for whatever reason, your mother or your primary caregiver, which might not have been your mother, I don't know your story, right? But she wasn't regulated. Her nervous system was in a state of dysregulation. Maybe she was anxious. Maybe she was working 3 jobs to try to feed you, right? Maybe she had a husband who was an alcoholic and beat her, or maybe, you know, he just yelled. Maybe she was in a war-torn territory. I don't know your story. Maybe her mother had one of those stories. And so she was running a really strong avoidant tendency pattern. And so for whatever reason, the brilliance of you as an infant, think of yourself, all of you, as an infant right now. Take a breath at how cute you were, right? Watch yourself laying on your mother's breast. Yeah? And listen to that sense in your body of closure, that understanding at a deep level that you weren't safe there, that your primary caregiver wasn't regulated. And so there she was, she would put you down in the cradle. And finally, you would get to relax. You wove your nervous system to self-regulate, to be able to come back to peace on your own. Yeah, so the avoidance, when they get enmeshed with someone else, cuddling, hugging, all these things, right? They go into dysregulation because they're associating it with a lack of safety. But when you're in your own bed, you're single, you're all these things, you're going away, you're leaving, right? It'll be safe because you're with yourself. Right, so this is the avoidant tendency. So if this isn't you, can you think of one, at least, person in your life who you're like, whoa, massive avoidant? Can you think of that person? Give them a hug in the ether, not in the reality. They won't want it. Yeah? Okay. All right, let's check in with the next one. Anxious. Anxiously attached. So kind of like reverse the roles. With anxiously attached, what happened was maybe they were left in the cradle alone too long. Right? And they would scream and cry and scream and cry. And then finally the mother came and picked them up and said, hey, baby, it's okay. It's okay, I'm here. And they said, I don't have to be alone. Right? It's okay. It's okay. And then they were put back in the cradle again and they said, no, 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 don't leave me here. Don't leave me here. Don't leave me here. Right? And so they always wanted that hugging and that cuddling and that holding. Right? And so when they weren't getting that, they became really anxious. So these are the people for your 8-minute hugs. 8-minute hugs, anyone? Yeah. Cuddle puddles? Yeah. Oh, here we go. Yeah. We would find more anxiously attached people in Tantra scenes, I think. Yeah. Yeah. And so like, bless your caregiver. They were a safe place for you to learn to co-regulate your nervous system. That's a really important part of toddlerhood. But the thing is, they would sometimes, drop you off and leave you. And it would develop within you a fear of dysregulation. And so when you were on your own, you became dysregulated and you needed to cuddle to regulate. Yeah, so you see, it's a bit of the opposite of the avoidant. Yeah. And then we have disorganized attachment style. So when we talk about trauma, this is also something I should quantify for the sake. Oh, I see some of you laughing and going, da, 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 this is me. We should quantify trauma since we're going to be talking about it. And I want to also quantify the fact that I'm not a trauma therapist or a psychotherapist, that I don't believe in allopathic medicine or any sense of allopathic way of interacting, that I come at things from a very much more holistic perspective, a psychosomatic perspective, that my medical credentials are that I'm a naturopathic doctor. So looking at holistic medicine, including body, mind, and spirit, but not diagnosing off of the DSM, the manual for psychotic and other dissociative issues that deal in the traditional realm of psychology. That's not where I come from. Yeah. So when we're talking about trauma, though, right, I like to embrace it a little more casually, like lowercase t trauma, something that we all have and something that we're, always unfolding into and discovering and facing more of and embracing and thus moving through because we faced it, integrating it into our existence. Yeah. However, there is a real thing, capital T trauma, just like the one of you shared, the rape, yeah, that you had. That's a capital T trauma. Now, it's not childhood trauma that we're talking about. Maybe some of you were involved in childhood sexual abuse, which is a capital T trauma, and we don't want to belittle or make less of capital T trauma by talking about lowercase t trauma. So I want to make that really clear as well. Yeah? But those of you who did have capital T trauma growing up, so this is like things I mentioned, abusive parents, right? Alcoholism or addiction, growing up in war zones, sexual abuse, yeah, things like this, capital T trauma, almost always, or like abandonment, having a parent leave, having a parent die. I mean, the list goes on. Huh? Almost always. Capital T trauma during childhood leads to the disorganized attachment style. And this is a mix of the avoidant and the anxious. Oh, I see some oh faces. You were waiting for that drum roll, huh? Yeah, yeah. And so you have this person that says, no, get away from me. I need to regulate on my own. But they say, no, come here, don't leave. Have you met someone like this? Let me tell you the crazy thing that happens with this organized attachment style. It's really, really, really difficult for them to have empathy. The reason is that their nervous system is constantly in a state of overdrive, right? There's an elevated level of cortisol in their bloodstream almost at all times. Yeah. And they're functioning from the amygdala, from the hindbrain. And when you function from the hindbrain, like reptile brain stuff, it's flight or fight, it's survival. Yeah. When you're just trying to survive, you don't have access to the forebrain or the prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex is this beautiful thing that makes us human. It's what allows us to think outside of the present moment. Like I might be looking around and sensing into you. But if I was stuck in my hindbrain, I would just be giving this lecture and I would just be going and just trying to get through and getting it over. Right? So there's very little empathy. Right? Difficult to access compassion. An inability to kind of just sit with another human because I'm just trying to get through my day. And so often these people, if things are going too well in their life, they'll pick fights because they want those cortisol levels to maintain their high level, right? They want to make sure that they constantly have enough high accelerated cortisol. Yeah. And the sense of normal is chaos, is fighting. And so if things get too calm, completely inadvertently, completely subconsciously, they'll pick fights to get back to their childhood normal. Do you know someone like this? I see some hands going up, yeah. Can you love them a little bit more now knowing what they've been through? Yeah, I see some thumbs going up. Yeah, and hey, like if you're friends with them, ask them about their childhood. And this will help you become a more compassionate, loving human. So, all the avoidance in here, like, God, I got it easy after I heard about disorganized attachment. Yeah. So the thing is, it takes about, I will say 1.5 years to rewire the nervous system to get back to secure. Okay, everyone's like, I'm fucking doing that. Set the clock. Yeah. Well, the thing is, often you need a partner for this kind of work, right? That sense of remaking the primary caregiver. Often that's a romantic, intimate relationship. And often that person has to be secure. Wait, I only can be in a relationship with one of the 2%, the securely attached ones, to repattern my attachment style? Yeah, I know. I saved the bad news. Yeah. But wait a minute, that means that you're going to be priming those Jedis to look for who's securely attached. Okay, so imagine, let's role play, huh? Imagine you're at a Tantra festival, not like this, but one in person. I mean, we can do it like this. It's a little harder. Imagine you're at a Tantra festival in person. Look around the room, wherever you are. Imagine all these people. There's 30, 40 people in the room. Maybe they're doing an ecstatic dance, right? Look for the men who are like this, right? They're doing this. They're like, right? They're like pushing into you. They're like, attached to me. I'm here. Yeah, you see those men? I see lots of laughter. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, so we have our anxiously attached. They want to touch you and do this and whatever. Okay. For the women, more or less the same. Yeah. The avoidance are over in the other corner, like dancing with their eyes closed. Right. The disorganized attachments are doing both, back and forth. So you have to like watch them continuously, because you can't just assume that what they do at one time is going to be it. Yeah. And then the securely attached, remember, the ones that you're not necessarily looking for, but perhaps feeling into, are the ones that don't give a shit. Have you ever met a human who really doesn't give a shit? No fucks given. And not in an aggressive way. Yeah. But like in a really, really, really deep way of being okay with themselves, not needing to prove anything or get anything from anyone. Yeah. All right. There's a lot coming in here on the chat. Sophie says, I see online that 40 to 70% of people are securely attached. Surely that's rubbish. Yeah. So there's different estimates depending on what you do. What I think this isn't a trauma-based perspective. So 40 to 70% is in your classical psychological analysis of early childhood development. So it's not used in a trauma style, and it's not used with the wiring of the nervous system. So what I'm talking about is a little different. And I tend to be extreme with my 2% for effect. But yeah, what I would encourage you to do is make a survey of the people that you know. Make a survey, perhaps of your family, make a survey and just feel into it and see, and find your own percentage, report back. Yeah. And yes, I would say surely that's rubbish as well, though. And know that every decade in the modern world, it's getting worse and worse and worse. You can imagine how parents are raising their children now versus how parents were even raising their children 10 years ago. And so you'll have a lot more anxiously attached and avoidant kids, right? Because a mom, right, or a dad who's not really present with their child, that's not capital T trauma, but it's definitely lowercase t. And it will definitely result in more lonely babies in cradles, right? Or it will result in more avoidant children who have been presented with a screen. Yeah. And so there's this whole other architecture of the wiring of the human nervous system that's coming out as a result of technology and technology interface with humanity, that we don't actually know what the effect will be. Yeah. Okay, so we have lots of questions coming in now. We got through attachment. We haven't even gotten into Reiki and trauma analysis. So I'll have to go there. But okay, going back up to where I didn't see. Someone said, I really want to participate in primal play parties, but I'm also terrified of the energetic overwhelm and the attention that might come with it. Yeah, so first and foremost, you are all given permission to be snobs. right? And usually after you attend my lectures, you become a snob anyway, because you know better, right? You know how to see, you know how to see through, right? You can start to diagnose, for want of a better word, what's behind that person's actions. Right? You're suspending judgment, you're engaging curiously, right? And you're just seeing probably what's behind this. Don't just take everything for face value. That's critical inquiry. Yeah. And so that primal play party, check who's going, or maybe go to the door and just get a feel for it. And if it feels like, whoa, this room is full of people who don't give a shit. Fuck yeah, I want to be here. Or whoa, this room really feels like it's full of these people, right? Looking for something. Not my scene. Not a place that I feel like I can grow. Yeah? And really settle in that. And if you want to do one of these parties or whatever it is, hand pick your people. Yeah. All right. So astropathic medicine, I said allopathic medicine, which is Western medicine. Astropathic medicine would be like medical astrology. I love it. Okay. So someone said in a direct message to me, I had a highly traumatized partner who would frequently explode in rage. It was the most damaging relationship I ever had. I would not recommend dating one. This is like new Google recommendations. Don't you wish you could do that for all your ex-partners? Not funny, sorry. So yeah, but the thing is, the person who wrote this, I want you to think of your ex-partner's father and his father's father and his father's father's father, because this isn't something that started with your ex-partner. Yeah, I see some deep breaths. This is something that's been coming for a long time through the lineage. And yeah, everyone was just kind of playing out their role. And the thing is that we have 95%, give or take. I have to be careful with my percentages now. 95% of our everyday actions are subconscious. Right? They're not coming from our conscious mind. They were things that were embedded into us or programmed into us in the first 7 years of life. They are our parents. We are becoming our parents. Women, you're becoming your mother. Men, you're becoming your father. And guess what? There's no way out of it. The only way out is through. And I know you're like gritting your teeth and you're like, I don't like this woman anymore. I gotta go. The avoidants are already logging out of Zoom. Yeah, I mean, but hey, guess what? It's okay. It's okay. And you gotta go through it. You gotta see yourself, witness yourself becoming your mother and your father before you can detox it. Because otherwise you're just going to be suppressing it your whole life. And it'll come up when you get pissed off. Anyone? Show of hands on that one. Oh yeah, there's my honest people. You're gorgeous when you're honest. Yeah. So you just gotta, it's just like taking a really big shit or a massive cry. You have to let it out, right? And own it fully. Own it fully. Be with a partner who will call you on it lovingly, right? Yeah. Whatever your mother's name is, they can greet your mother coming out of you. And then you own it and say, oh my God, I totally just became my mom. Okay, yeah, that's a thing. That's the only way out, I promise. And unless anyone else has any way to hack it, but I haven't really heard of it. So yeah, sit with that, knowing that. And what we do in this consciousness movement in any scene of yoga, whether it's Tantra or, you know, a satsang for any other teacher, is we try to take that 95% subconscious and little by little kind of bring some of it over into the conscious part of our operating system. And that's what expanding consciousness, expanding awareness, that's what it means. So that our habitual actions of our facial expressions to how we speak, to how we hold our body, to our reactions emotionally, that they're a little more inquired. Man, there's space to choose mindfully how we're showing up. Yeah. So it's work. That's the work. But we have to own it. Okay. So let's see what else is here in the chat. So this is a beautiful question from Myrid. How can we tell if someone doesn't give a shit in a healthy way versus apathy or trauma-fueled hyper-independence, which would be avoidance? It's a pretty easy test. There will be, so what you have to do, that like the prerequisite to this test, and the prerequisite, everyone, really clear. If you haven't been listening the whole time or you're tuned out, listen now. The prerequisite to any of this seeing through is that you are not seeing. A clarified version of clarity is seeing. So you are not bringing your doubts, right, and your worries and your trauma to the seeing, but rather you're letting the seeing happen through you. Do you see that? Because there's filters that you're looking through to perceive the world, and we'll talk about those with the Reichian pattern analysis in a second. But you kind of have to clear yourself of those and just observe, like without any need to judge or any need to assess. You just observe, you feel into things. And then these people, like the latter in Myrid's questions, they're not giving a shit in a way of apathy or trauma-fueled hyper-independence or avoidance. You'll feel like an angst, a grittiness, some kind of like push down anger coming from those people. Like, ugh. Yeah, you get that sense? We can talk about emotions because they often have a sound or a facial expression so that you can feel them. Yeah. Okay. Versus the person who doesn't give a shit in a healthy way, kind of is just doing their own thing. And then you walk towards them and they'll look you in the eye and they'll be fully present and regulated in their own system. They'll feel safe. And they'll smile at you and then they'll go back to doing their own thing. So there's this like too cool for school aspect. And then there's just this cool aspect. You see the difference? Yeah? Okay. All right. So Pushkar said, I've noticed that one could be anxious for some scenarios, but avoidant for others. So there's two things here. One is that the person might be disorganizedly attached. Yeah, so they go back and forth. But the other is that, let's say two avoidants get into a relationship. The one who's more avoidant, it's like a tug of war in avoidance. The one who's more avoidant wins, and it will push the other into being anxiously attached for that relationship. Have you had that happen? Yeah. Who's an avoidant who got into a relationship with an even stronger avoidant? Yeah. And you started noticing all these like anxious, weird patterns of checking your phone every 2 seconds that are not you coming in. Yeah. And that's, I mean, this is like baseline attachment theory as well, of how you use it and work with it in your life, that the anxious ones are the ones that are like constantly clawing out, where's mommy, or where's this person, right? Or, did they write me yet? Checking their phone all the time or calling them all the time or whatever it is. And then the anxious ones are the ones that deeply at their root fear rejection. That's why they leave. That's why they break up. That's why they don't get into relationships. Because what's at the root of it is a deep fear of rejection. And so when you're going through your life, like really interface with that. And if you're in a fucking Tantra temple, you're walking around, like that fear of rejection is going to come up really strong. Yeah, but hopefully you can take enough of the snobbishness of this, being able to see where you're not going to want to be there. So before we go further in the questions, I want to say something that I wanted to say at the beginning, but we got wrapped into questions too fast. It had to do with one of your questions at the beginning, which was about how do we know when we're ready, or how do I join the cuddle puddle, or something like this. And the only outcome that you're going to get from really embodying what we're talking about in this lecture is that you're not ready for Tantra. Right? And that's not only you, but most modern humans today. We're not ready for Tantra. Yeah. So I hate to be the bearer of bad news. But, you know, that's why we have the yogasanas, was because the human body became too tight to sit in meditation for hours on end. So Krishnamacharya went up to the Himalayas and the rishis gifted him asana. That was only 100 years ago. Fuck, someone said, yeah. Yeah. And so we have to do the asana first to open the body to even be ready to sit in meditation, to go into the last 4 limbs of yoga. Is that a mic drop, Marina? So I've typed out for you the definition of Tantra. I've just put it in the chat. So Tantra it's like a conjunct of 2 Sanskrit words. Tanoti, which means expansion. And Sanskrit's a vibrational language. So you should feel, if you all say this in your muted state, Tanoti. Tanoti, I think it's an O, but I've put the T-A-N in capital so you could see it. Tanoti. Expansion. And Rayati, liberation. So expansion towards liberation. That sounds a lot like the last 2 limbs of yoga. Yeah. We have Pratyahara, Dhyana, Dharana, Samadhi. Samadhi is that liberation, that ultimate liberation. But guess what? You got to get through the first limbs first. Wait a minute. So you're telling me that all those people in the Tantra skipped a bunch of shit and they're just trying to go have free love and sex? Yes, that's exactly what I'm telling you. Okay. So back to that work. Remember that work from the beginning? That work we have to do? Yeah, got to do it. And so this would be like, I'm going to make an analogy. Please don't get offended. It would be like a bunch of kindergarteners trying to do college level mathematics. Can you see them with their glasses going around with their crayons saying, okay, we're going to do the cosine of 14,000 minus, you know, what I mean, they're probably not even using subtraction in college level mathematics. You see? And that's what's happening today. And that's why you have these things like rape, right? Or this massive discomfort. Or like I was teaching at a Tantra festival and I've been out of the Tantra scene for 10 years. And I went back to help open the Tantra scene in the Balkans at a very well-intended festival called ADA, if you heard of it. Yeah, it was in Montenegro. We had it for the first time this past summer and we'll have it again in September. So you can all meet me in person there. But I saw, you know, these babas, these like jiggly, fat old men, fucking 24-year-old blonde girls in the temple. Yeah, and there's nothing that's okay with that in the modern world. And of course, who am I to judge what's okay and what's not? It's happening, so it must be okay. And yet, what I'm saying is not okay is speaking into those power dynamics that one of you asked about at the beginning. Yeah. Of course, consent culture, which you would say, but the 24-year-old blonde girl seemed to be okay with it, right? She gave consent. Well, how much of her unresolved trauma was playing into some kind of daddy pattern, trying to please her daddy, right? Wanting to be loved, thinking that this was the only way she could be loved. What do we know? Maybe she was raped when she was 4. And there was a big shame, and this kind of going back into the pattern was the only way that she felt safe, or that she was doing something right because she was pleasing him. Yeah, I see some looks of disgust on your face. And yet this is very much the world that we exist in. Because working through, walking through, sitting with each of our own individual childhood trauma is not something that we do normally around the dinner table. And yet maybe it needs to be. Because otherwise, all of these unlooked at aspects of our existence are going to play out in any way they can. Yeah, and Tantra is a big, big field where things can play. Yeah. So next time you're in the Tantra temple, and I know I've already ruined it for you by now, you're going to be looking around, right, and seeing all of these power structures. And rather than just thinking, oh, free love, it's all great, right? You'll be actually bringing yourself to your prefrontal cortex, using your humanity to inquire into, is this, what's happening here? Not is this okay, but what's really happening here? And this is a question that we use a lot at TIFA, at the Institute for Aliveness. What's really going on here? Not in a way where we need to say something's bad or good or right or wrong, but like what's actually going on? What stories is that 24-year-old blonde girl playing out? Right, and that Baba, like clearly we know he's enjoying himself and quite happy. Yeah, but what stories is he playing out? What did that seduction process look like? How much of it was integrated in the body versus in that place of lust or desire? Yeah. And yeah, there's so much. So let's catch up to this chat. Well, there's a lot here. Okay. How to partner with someone that has disorganized attachment. This is the hardest question that I'll receive all night, I think. This person says, I'm partly securely attached and partly anxiously attached according to times. Is that possible? Just like we talked about, it could be depending upon your partner. And especially if you have a disorganizedly attached partner, then you will be part of the time anxious and part of the time avoidant, just because you're trying to dance with them. They take one step forward, you take one step back. Yeah, that kind of tango. That's how polarity works. And I will say as well that it's very common that an anxious person is mating with or partnered with, pair bonded with an avoidant. And those relationships will always be incredibly painful, full stop. So there's almost no way out of them, no way out of the pain. Deep breath into that one. If you go into a period of trying really hard and practicing, doing the work, right, there might be a way that you can walk forward together, but it's very difficult. Huh? It takes a tremendous amount of mindfulness and de-storying. Yeah. And I mean, if you want to take that journey, like, you guys are welcome. At TIFA, we have an 18-month program that not only repatterning the nervous system, but way more than this is what we work on in a really cohesive container. So yeah. Okay. What I will say, though, to answer your question, Jean-Michel, is that if your partner does have a disorganized attachment style, that when they're in a good mood, right, when they're feeling safe and secure for a moment in time, talk to them about conflict and the pattern, right, of picking fights, and have a lot of space where you just sit and the eyes closed so that they can continue to regulate their nervous system without getting into that altered state, and allow them to see their own pattern, right? You don't give a man a fish, you teach him how to fish. Huh? And so once they can see their own pattern, if they're willing and really desiring to break through it, they can. But it takes a lot of accountability, a lot of unconditional love, right? And a lot of having them go sit on their own and not playing into being their mommy or their daddy, right? Because often those people with disorganized attachment style just want to be told how great they are. And so it will also take you not doing that. Right? It might take some time apart, things like this. Yeah, it's not easy. let us know how it goes. Yeah. And then also obviously having more compassion for them of how they think and how they're running from hindbrain. Okay. How do we help our children heal from trauma, lowercase t and capital T? Good question. So this is the fallacy of the parent, and I haven't been a parent yet in this lifetime, so of course I'm speaking completely unqualified. You're welcome to say shut up at any point if it's not valid or valuable. But parents are supposed to mess up, right? There's this fallacy that you want to try to, have a perfect childhood for your kid and prevent trauma. Like, trauma is also a really important part of character building. So it's not about preventing it fully, but this question, right? How do we help our children heal? Heal in itself, I would say, is almost assumptive of a word. Right? Because what if they didn't need to heal anything because there was nothing wrong, but the trauma instead was a gift that resulted in coping patterns or mechanisms of how they run their life. And rather than change anything or heal anything, there was an invitation for them to simply observe themselves and become aware. Just like that process we talked about with Jean-Michael's partner in the disorganized attachment. Like that mirror, invite them to look in the mirror. Yeah. And then of course, the practices like meditation, self-regulation practices, bringing people into the body, into a place of full breath, asking them at all times, if their jaw is clenched, if their shoulders are tight, if they're breathing into their belly, and help them to find a new stability and baseline for their nervous system to be regulated more often. And that when they become dysregulated, that, hey, check it out. Are you getting angry? Yeah. What does that feel like? How fast is your heart going? Is your face feeling hot? Like the gift of awareness over the nervous system is the biggest gift that you can give to anyone, no matter their age. And definitely the biggest gift you can give to a child. Yeah. So I do have a background in yogasana, and I am a yoga therapist and very biased towards something called Viparita Karani, which is putting your legs up the wall. Yeah. Has anyone ever tried it? Yeah. So you can do it. You can do it right now if you want. Take your computer, your device, whatever. Go and you lay down on your side, put your bum against the wall, and then roll onto your back and put your legs up the wall. You'll feel, and in my medical physiological practice, this is the fastest way that I have found to switch over into the parasympathetic nervous system, to calm the fuck down. And so if things are busy or things are crazy or someone just yelled at you or the kid is crying or whatever the story is, doesn't matter what the story is. Right? This is a super powerful way to regulate. I love those of you walking away from your computer. The bum is finding the wall. Yeah. And you'll feel it. There's no words that are needed for this. Right? It's that draining of lymph and blood, right, towards the sacral nerve plexus, and that switch over into calm. It's a gift you give yourself, and it's a gift you give to everyone around you. All right, so that's the question of how do we help our children with trauma and trauma. All right, a question. Could you speak to how attachment style is affected by being raised communally? I realized that I was raised this way, but I wasn't in a happy, hippie way because others had to fill in for my mentally ill parents. We lived with our parents, but our grandmother, who definitely had their own trauma, took care of us after school, and various aunts and uncles did the rest. Yeah. So, I mean, all of you are able to kind of see the patterns and the themes here, and there may be things that you're familiar with. So having some kind of, I mean, if mentally ill parents, that was likely a capital T trauma. right? There was some kind of perhaps an abandonment story. And Myra, only you know this, right? I can't speak directly to it, but that sense of, you know, your primary caregivers aren't there, don't have time for you, or are unable. Yeah. And then from there, you might find that even though there were so many people who cared for you, that it might have felt like this replacement, or like there was a forcing of sorts. And yeah, if you're saying that your grandmothers, for example, who had their own trauma took care of you, then in the first 7 years of life, they can also subconsciously program your outlook on the world. And so the question is directly how attachment style is affected. So attachment style is really that first, that it's when you're in the cradle. So you'd have to go back to what was happening then, but it sounds like this would definitely result in an avoidant attachment style. And this is super common theme of people who are raised in communities will have avoidant attachment and try to leave the community as fast as possible and go and start to live on their own, because there was this this sense of there's just a lot of drama in the air. I need to self-regulate even if you're a baby. Yeah. So see, I mean, maybe that's accurate. Maybe it's not. Maybe that was worth nothing. Rewind, ignore, or you can speak to in the messages if it feels accurate. Oh, here you wrote, Myra said, yep, I think it was more traumatizing because our parents were for the most part physically there, but checked out or else explosive. Yeah, Marina, my links. I don't know what my links are. AndyX.ai is my personal website. Oh, that's not right. AndyX.ai is my personal website. And I give astrology readings, but come hang out with us at the instituteforaliveness.com and also the initiation.co. You can read up on that stuff. And I'm on Facebook and Instagram, Institute for Aliveness. Yeah, but we're not quite done yet, huh? Someone says, this is so refreshing to hear in these spaces. Okay, Robin asks, how can a person who doesn't give a shit heal you? What a great question. That essence of not giving a shit means that they're not playing into the game that everyone else is playing. So the game of, right, they're not playing that game. That's what they don't give a shit about. But remember when you walked by and you made eye contact and they looked at you and they were regulated, they did give a shit about you. They just don't give a shit to play the game. So thank you for that clarity. And also I want to dismantle the hierarchical dynamic that you've put in your question about them healing you. First of all, none of you need to be fucking healed. We just need to face shit, right? No one can heal you, right? You just face shit more and are comfortable and more peaceful in and of yourself. So dismantle the whole healer dynamic, or the fact that anyone can give you anything, even me. I'm just reminding you of things that you already know deep down inside of you. And as you reclaim those parts of yourself, right, you grow in your resilience and you grow in your power. Yeah. And you look really good there. Yeah. Okay. So someone said, there's so much here. Someone said they're starting to think that they might be poly, but perhaps it has to do with their attachment history. Yes, there are a large number of avoidance in the poly scene. Yeah. Someone says I was adopted at 3 months old. Am I a combination of my birth and adopted mothers? That's a really interesting question. I'm not even going to pretend to have an answer, but the process of adoption itself could have had an effect upon your development. Yeah, I would highly recommend clinical research for that. searching clinical research, so doing Google Scholar search, the effect of adoption on the nervous system and attachment theory. If you can't find anything TRA, please write me a message and I will assign one of our students at the Institute for Aliveness to do a term paper on this for you. And it'll be published in our quarterly academic journal. We have a hybrid academic journal magazine that I would strongly encourage you guys to read. It's topics like this, topics like, you know, stuff about hormonal birth control. Like there's so many different topics. Yeah, and you can find those on the instituteforaliveness.com website. Check out the journals. Okay. So let's see. You're speaking my exact story. Thank you for this. Okay, someone sent a private message. The private messages are the juicy ones. Any guidance on how to move through the belief that my only value lies with sex within a relationship? Yeah. The first thing that comes is actually to ask people that you're relating to who are not romantic relating, so your friends, what value you bring. And get that message and be really clear that it's really uncomfortable for you to ask this, that you've been assigned by this woman named Andy to do this, and that you're here and you're really uncomfortable, but you're trying to just get mirrors up into yourself. And if they don't want to say anything, they don't have to say anything at all, but you're simply asking what value that you bring to the relationship. And once you get that, then that'll be like a boost. But if you know your pattern, which it sounds like you do, that your only value lies in sex, then I would encourage you, the next romantic relationship that you get in, go for a solid 2 to 3 months without having sex with that person. Learn to court, learn to be courted, right? Learn to see what else is exchanged when sex isn't on the table, right? And if that person says they won't wait 2 to 3 months, clearly they're not worth engaging with anyway. Yeah, but that's how you give yourself time and space to build value. And the rest of you who didn't write that question could be an invitation for you as well. It's super powerful. And those of you, especially women, but men as well sometimes, who are running mommy, daddy, people pleasing stories. Where are my people pleasers at? Yeah. Where there's this sense of getting dopamine from outside because you're not giving yourself pleasure, right? You're not loving yourself in an embodied way enough. So you need to get pleasure or a dopamine surge from someone telling you how good you are. And for women especially, but as I said, men as well, being good at sex as a way to get this approval that we all seek in life. Yeah, that's not helping you. So I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I wouldn't recommend doing that anymore. And it's not like you can just switch out of it. You have to witness yourself in the pattern first. Remember? You have to fully become your mother or whatever it was. There's no way out but through. So witness yourself in there, witness yourself doing it, and then you can just stop in the mid-act and be like, hey, sorry, I'm playing out a pattern that I don't want to do anymore. And whenever you're ready, walk away. And you don't have to walk away from the relationship, right? But walk away from the way of being. Yeah. Okay. Someone wrote, I am not what happened to me. I am who I choose to become. And then put a flaming heart. Don't hate me. Yeah. I mean, fuck, you can hate me. There's a lot going on in the New Age scenes about these kind of disembodied ideas of empowerment, right? And they are always going to come at odds and in conflict with this sense of nervous system wiring that's actually more true. And so whereas we can try to reprogram our mind, there's so much positive psychology that effectively won't work. And so it's up to you to instead, rather than reprogram your mind, reprogram your body. Yeah, and so all of the positive affirmations and the quotes that you have around, they're nice to look at, but they're not actually going to rewire your nervous system. And so that doesn't mean don't look at them, but don't rely on them as a crutch, is what I would say. And so, yeah, I'll go back to what I said just a few moments ago, which was that your trauma is your gift, right? They're gifts. They have put you on a course in your hero's journey. It's nothing that you need to be shameful about or deny or wish it didn't happen or whatever. And you have become who you've become because of them. And whereas you can't necessarily just, boom, choose to be different, remember, because it's a process that we work through. It is the work. Yeah? Yeah? Okay. Okay. Hey, gorgeous people. Nobody's your savior, someone says. In my experience, that only perpetuates traumas. It leaves you with less power. Yeah. Cool. You're so welcome, Tiare, and all of you. So, cool. So last question here, and I want to see if we have time for the Reichian trauma attachment styles and patterns. But this last question was, can your attachment style manifest differently in friendships versus romantic relationships and sexual contexts? No, usually you're you. But the difference is that in either friendship or romantic relationship, if you're an avoidant, but you're with a stronger avoidant, or if you're anxiously attached, but you're with a stronger anxiously attached person, it will kind of polarize you to the opposite. So yeah, but normally it's like your story that you carry around, and you can get by in life and pretend like you're not running this energy when you're not confronted with an intimate relationship. But when you're confronted with an intimate relationship, whether that be a best friend or a lover, right, that's when it really comes out. And that's why you need to be in relationship to work through a lot of these things. And so I would invite you even to, have your next, and this is what I did last year, have your next relationship be one that you explicitly intend to rewire your patterns in, and have this be part of the discussion of your first date. And if that person's not up for it, it's like, cool, that's part of my prerequisite for a relationship. Ships sailing, just like any other ships, are meant so that you can fully practice something, grow, right? They come and they go. If anyone doesn't know by now that relationships come and go, if you're still running out some Disney princess fairy tale of happily ever after, right? That's not the world that we live in. Pluto has transited through Libra. There has been a death and rebirth of this kind of one forever relationship. And that doesn't mean that it can't happen. I hope for many of you have a partner for life, but that's not the reality of the world that we live in now. So can you enter a relationship not with that desire for it to be forever, but rather with that desire to really allow it to be the work, and that both parties are conscious of it? Yeah. I hope I didn't pop too many bubbles with that. Or if I did, maybe they were meant to be popped. Oh, evil laugh. Okay, so, all right. Rob wants a dating site. Where do I find an aspiring adult who's eager to do what needs to be done to stay clear? I tend to follow my eyes, which seems to lead to drama over depth. So there is a lot of idiosyncrasies in what you said with follow your eyes. I guess you mean looks. And then you have drama over depth. So, I mean, rewire your values. And this would be a really powerful exercise for all of you to do. This is something that my brother takes people through in his permaculture of polyamory lecture. Write out a list of all of the things that you need to be fulfilled with, right? If it's intellectual stimulation, physical attraction, time spent together, adventure together, exploring new ideas, doing the work, self-growth, somatic experiences, sexual relating, whatever it is, like write out your map. And in a polyamorous setting, you would write out the people who fulfill each different one. But for you, essentially what you're doing in a normal relating setting, I don't want to say normal, I'm kind of polarizing, marginalizing, but for whatever kind of relating you want to do, make sure that you're really clear on your needs. I'll repeat, make sure you're really clear on your needs, because most of you probably have gone your whole life, right? Just being okay, getting by, not needing your needs to be met. Anyone? Yeah, my hand's up for this one. Yeah. And so get really clear on your needs, and that's your needs for growth, right? As well as your needs for fulfillment. And then when you're clear on what you want, you'll be more primed to have your value system oriented around getting what you want, believing that your needs can be met. Right? And then you'll find the pretty girls coming and going, and it'll be like, okay, yeah, that's not actually going to fulfill you deeply. So know what will, yeah, know what will. And as for your direct question, which was where do I find an aspiring adult? Ask yourself where that person would be hanging out. What are they doing? What are they into? Right? And go there. But also, on the other hand, just trust life and you do you. And as you do you, you'll probably meet someone. I'm a huge fan of dating apps for people who are traveling and moving and looking to meet people. I'm not a fan of them for relationships. Yeah, there's this dating app called The Universe that's swiping you right and left every day as it turns you around corners, and it'll put you face to face with the person that you're meant to meet sooner rather than later. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, let's see. Oh, we got some astrology in there. Yep. Okay. In the 5 minutes that we have left, I am going to share my screen with you and talk to you about the Reichian trauma patterns, because I promised you I would in the description for this lecture. So there are 5 specific character types, yeah? And I'll zoom in so that you can see these. And as a part of the X-ray vision, this is something that I find really important. And I've been presenting these at the Tantra festivals ever since it started in our COVID time. Thanks, Karina. I love your sense of humor too. So here we go. Ready? These are a timeline. So we have here from the unwanted child to the perfectionist, trauma through the first 7 years of life. So the unwanted child, or the schizoid as it's called clinically, is the one that had trauma earlier in life. So we're looking at some, it can be lowercase t trauma, in that cradle age. And what often happened was there was fighting, or there was a war scene, or there was alcoholism or drug abuse or screaming or something. And that toddler in the cradle, younger usually than 1.5, started telling itself it's not safe here. Right? It's not safe here. And so the way in which they ran energy was up and out, leaving. You see there's a twist in the body. One hip is forward. There's kind of a skinniness, and there's a doubtfulness on the face. When this person's driving on the road, they'll say, hey man, why are you cutting me off? They'll feel that they're always in danger, because the conditioned story that they're looking through and the filter that they're seeing the world is, it's not safe here. All right. If that's you, let that sink in, sit with it. Second person, the needy child, or the oral. So this is your classic quintessential anxiously attached. You see the posture, the hips are jutted forward, this chest is kind of sunken. This one needs mommy's breast in order to regulate. The way that they run their energy is back and forth in this kind of pattern, back and forth from another person, all right? They have a very big inability to run their energy on their own. They're codependent, okay? So this needy child, or the oral, is, it's self-explanatory now. The childhood trauma happened roughly between the age of, let's say, 2 to 3, and something happened where they weren't safe on their own and they needed the mommy to come and help them. So you're probably already thinking now, how do the attachment styles overlay with the Reichian trauma character structures? They don't directly, but we can see, just like the needy child, that overlap. All right, next is the endurer, or the masochist. So this is a classic one. It's like a stout body. I think of it as the entire Scotland The entire country of Scotland, if you know about their history with Britain, it's been quite tumultuous. And the story that the Endurer tells when they run their energy out and down into the earth, out and down into the earth, is life is hard. You just got to go through it. That was my best Scottish accent. The masochist is the one that, you know, something happened at the age of, I don't know, 3, 4 or so, where they were just told that they can't cry, they have to get up and keep going. Right. And so that became the filter that they looked through and began to run their entire life from. Next up, the controller, the leader, the psychopath. This is me, if you want to see an example, right? This is the one that around the age of 5 or 6 or so, something happened where they were left alone, right? For me, it was I was left in a shopping mall and my mom and brother went off, right? And, you know, I'm like wandering around, not knowing where I am, lost. Right? And you can do regressions where you see what memory pops up in your mind to find out which of the traumatic things. And it's also, you don't need to know because you can see it in your everyday actions. The controller, the psychopath, the leader runs their energy out, up, down, and regenerates it, right? It's this kind of strong bodybuilder kind of body that with that regenerative energy, the story, the filter that we're telling ourselves is no one's coming to save me. I have to do it all on my own. Yeah, any of you out there with me? Yeah. All right, finally, last but not least is the perfectionist, right? The obsessional. And it's the rigid type, classic rigid. You see that person? The whole country of Germany. This is a trauma that happened usually around 6 or 7 years old. And it was a trauma where the child was taught that they were not safe. They could not trust their inner intuition, that they had to listen to the outer authority. So the energy comes up and freezes. Yeah. And that freeze pattern, you can't break rules. You can't do that. Right. You know, someone like this, super easy to see the rigids. So effectively you see these body types. So if you want to be looking, you know, remember you're looking around the room. You see the 40 people in ecstatic dance with you. Start to see them, start to see what their body shape is saying, how they're running their energy. And then you can get some insight into their childhood trauma. And we're all one of these types. You might even be 2 of these types. You have a primary and a secondary. Right? And until you go back and you look at the filtering and you ask yourself the stories that you're telling that are running your whole life, right? You won't be able to be free of them unless you'll be controlled by them. All right. So, I mean, there's obviously a lot of mergers in the trauma scene. That second one where the hips are jutted forward and the postures like this. Go to a Tantra festival. Look at all those mergers who are, you know, wanting mommy's boobie. And this doesn't have to be bad, even though I'm making fun with them. Right? It is what it is. And maybe there's also a lot of leaving types, the schizoids, the number 1, right? And so in the temple, they completely leave their body. They're not able to really experience pleasure, or they're faking it. Faking orgasms, anyone? Yeah. Because they're not actually in their body because they don't believe it's safe here. And so a lot of de-armoring work. It's a new field. It's a very dangerous field. I can recommend some people for you to go to. But yeah, there's a lot here. There's a lot here. So I'm looking, last moment in the chat before we close. You guys have been amazing. Thank you all for being here and for being so beautiful. It's been really nice to hang out with you. If you were an incredibly clingy and shy child, is it something that happened to make you like that? Yes, it could be. I mean, so just like we can layer attachment styles onto the character structures, we can also layer on astrology. And it just becomes rich. And at the end of the day, still though, we don't want to stay attached to some kind of story of our trauma. And we're constantly doing the work to rewire. Yeah. So, yeah. All right. You guys are super, super, super welcome. This is a conversation that I hope continues. I hope you guys come hang out with me. I'm teaching again on this festival in a few days. Let me just look up when that is. It is, I believe on maybe the tech knows. Oh, aha, of course. It's yeah, on March 2nd, really early morning PST. And I'm teaching a class called Sex with Robots, which is going to be a lot of fun. Talking about futurism and where our sexuality is going. Of course not sex with robots, but yeah. Come out for that one. I would love to see all of you there. Come hang out at the Institute for Aliveness right after that lecture on March 2nd. We'll have a 2 hours writer's circle. We have a lot of free events at the Institute for Aliveness, and I would love to see you. Yeah. All right, I'm going to say goodnight for now, over and out from Oroville, India. Big hugs. Thank you all for being you. And thank you for doing the work. Ciao.